Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a little unpleasant to be the last speaker at a conference that has a very narrow topic, because you have to assume that a lot of ground will be covered by the previous speakers, and you don't want to skip over a lot of your points because they've already been made. So I chose the topic in a way that that you will hopefully find interesting, and yeah, there will be few slides that I will skip over rather more quickly, because the operation of blockchain and Bitcoin was explained in some detail already. So this is the outline of the presentation, and I'll start with defining virtual currencies, but maybe not in a way that you expect me to do it. I'd like to make a simple point. Before Bitcoin was created, we already had to deal with something that we didn't call virtual currencies, but fall into the same bracket, so-called, or something that ECB and we usually in Europe call centralized digital currencies, meaning that there actually is an operator and it's not based on blockchain. So we already had some experience with these systems before, and we had to think about whether or how to regulate them and learn sort of to live with them. So the difference from the newer and more interesting at the moment virtual currencies, the centralized currencies, they have an operator who maintains accounts, pretty much like a bank, and then books transactions between these accounts. Usually the value is tied to fiat currencies or gold, and an example is Liberty Reserve dollar or e-gold. And quite often these schemes are run without any license from unclear places, and the reason is simple, because they are used by internet scam operators or hackers and for laundering money. So quite often, already AML was mentioned, anti-money laundering controls. Quite often these are just symbolic or non-existent, and a big disadvantage from the point of view of the person who operates it is that although you have a layer of intermediaries, these exchangers who exchange real money into these systems in and out, still you can get tracked by law enforcement, and quite a few of these schemes over the years have been shut down. So let's be clear about this. Bitcoin partially was reaction to this, meaning that Bitcoin by design cannot be shut down by law enforcement, and maybe that's the reason why the creator prefers to stay anonymous. Pretty much everything here was mentioned, so I will skip. I'll just like to point out that the system or the users of Bitcoin and other blockchain-based virtual currencies are usually pseudonymous, not anonymous. And yeah, from my conversations with law enforcement people, they still prefer Bitcoin transactions to cash, because cash is just so much more difficult to track. So second point I'd like to cover is whether Bitcoin is a meaningful payment innovation. Once again, this was discussed at some length here. I'm really happy I don't have a slide on electricity consumption. I thank Michael for covering that. I'd like to talk about duration of the transactions from the point of view of payment users. The average Bitcoin transaction took about 12 minutes to confirm in October 2017. And if you think about this time length, that basically already tells you that you cannot use Bitcoin at point of sale situation, because if there is a coffee place in Prague that only takes Bitcoins, and they don't force you to stay there 10 minutes until the payment is confirmed. They're very trusting crypto anarchists there. But if you go to a supermarket and you have to wait 10 minutes for the payment to confirm, that's just not gonna get adopted in practice. And well, also something that was not mentioned here, central banks all over the developed world, and especially in Europe, are working on instant payment schemes. Once these are in place, transactions with bank deposits or commercial bank money will take a couple seconds to settle. Once again, Bitcoin or in general blockchain systems will have very hard time coming to such settlement times, although I think Ripple might be achieving a couple seconds at the moment. Also, this second thing that was already mentioned, Bitcoin was created by or thought up by Satoshi Nakamoto as a electronic cash for small internet transactions. Well, today, the average fee, if you don't want to wait hours for the transaction to confirm, the average fee is $5.50. So paying really, or micropayments over the internet are not feasible with the Bitcoin. I'm not saying that the commercially available alternatives have a solution for really small payments, but Bitcoin doesn't work for that at the moment. Also, the scalability or the capacity was mentioned. Czech Republic is quite interesting in the sense that we don't have a retail payment system. All the customer interbank payments go through our RTGS, so it's a rather robust RTGS solution. So worldwide, there are about 350,000 Bitcoin transactions per day. This is once again, I think I averaged the October numbers. And although there has been some changes in the algorithm to increase the capacity, still theoretically, Bitcoin can manage about 8 transactions per second, and reality is more about 3.5 or 4 per second. Czech National Bank's RTGS system or payment system at the every day today has a capacity of 2.5 million, practically handles 2.5 transactions per day. So that's once again to reinforce the point that Michael made in the morning, that Bitcoin has the capacity to serve maybe a small or mid-sized English town, but not a country of the size of the Czech Republic. And I even, it's not, I'll be clear here, it's not totally fair to compare RTGS transaction per second because we process batches, unlike, although Bitcoin blocks can also be thought about as batches, but basically at the moment our system is 100 times more efficient in the number of transactions than Bitcoin. And I don't have the electricity statistics, but I can tell you that we don't consume as much power as Ireland. Okay. Now, third point, the early response as CNB. CNB is not only a central bank, we're also a financial market supervisor. We supervise all parts of the financial market, so in that sense, it's a little bit more complicated than for central banks that are only central banks. So early response was coordinated with our colleagues in the Ministry of Finance and specifically with the Financial Intelligence Unit. Those are the people who are trying to fight money laundering and terrorist financing, and of course the tax authority was also involved in those discussions. So basically the discussions that we had about, and why I'm standing here as a employee of a cash and payment systems department, the early discussions were about, is this money? Does this fit under all the regulations that we have for how money operates and how money should work? And I'll be clear with you. Both the FIU and police were disappointed when we told them it's not money, it's not regulated. And that made their work slightly bit more complex. Anyway, Czech Financial Intelligence Unit, they published a sort of circular basically telling all the banks and other regulated entities that anything connected with virtual currency and bigger amounts of money is to be treated as highly risky. Then we participated in the work of European Banking Authority, which is a pan-European regulator for retail banking. They created a task force on virtual currencies, and first a warning was issued in December 2013. I think this is something that is still valid, and people who think about putting their money into ICOs should maybe go back a couple of years and reread it. Only play with the money you think you can lose or do without. Finally, in early 2014, we felt that there is a need to provide some clarity to the market participants, both those that we regulate and central bank unregulated entities. Also, the newspaper or the news or the media started asking questions. So up to today, the main message is that macroeconomically, virtual currencies are a marginal phenomenon. And we published a 2-page document on Bitcoin trading in February 2014. I'll explain shortly the contents. Basically, the main message: Bitcoins are not funds, as funds are defined in a piece of EU law called Payment Services Directive. So they're not banknotes, coins, that is probably obvious to everybody, but they're also not bank account money or electronic money from the legal point of view. So buying or selling Bitcoins, accepting them as payments is not regulated by the existing law and is not supervised by the central bank in Czech Republic. That is the case in the whole of EU because this understanding is shared by all 28 supervisors in the EU. Some more information that we put out in the document. Bitcoins are neither securities nor derivatives, but given that the topic of ICOs that was mentioned, I'll get to that in the end. This is only specifically, our approach basically applies to all virtual currencies, but maybe with this, the question whether they are securities or not, this is only specifically applicable to Bitcoin. Authorization might be required for derivatives based on Bitcoin or investment funds into Bitcoin. It doesn't matter in what your investment fund invests in, you're still a regulated entity. And one important result of our analysis is that credit institutions, banks are only allowed what they have written in their license. So trading Bitcoins is not written in a bank license. Banks are not allowed to trade Bitcoins or trade Bitcoins with their clients in the Czech Republic. Other central bank regulated entities may engage in Bitcoin trading, but we insist that they clearly distinguish what is regulated by us and what is, payments in real money and what are virtual currencies. I have to press more this thing. So fourth point about the regulation of virtual currencies. We are a bit ahead in Europe on the AML, the anti-money laundering rules, because in Czech Republic, anti-money laundering rules apply already from January of this year to any person providing services in connection with virtual currency. This definition is rather broad. And don't ask me what exactly it means because I'm not, I didn't write it, but basically it could mean that even if you just provide a wallet for holding virtual currencies, you should still, you should still follow the AML rules. Second important point is that the AML rules are enforced by the Financial Intelligence Unit, not by the central bank. And in the whole of EU, some AML regulation for virtual currencies is probably coming very soon, quite probably already from January 1st next year. But it will be it will be not as broad as in Czech Republic, more narrow. If you exchange virtual currencies for real money and vice versa, you should identify your clients and report suspicious transactions. Now, when it comes to the question whether we should regulate virtual currencies more, we are quite skeptical of this idea in the Czech Central Bank at the moment. The reason is, there are more reasons for that. I tried to list the most important of them. First of all, it's quite difficult to define virtual currencies legally in a very precise way and capture everything you want to capture and not capture something else. You have to bear with me. I'm a lawyer, so this is this is what I do. An example of that. In Japan, they decided regulating virtual currencies, and now the regulator has to issue a decision whether Nintendo game money is virtual currency or not. So, obviously, you have to put a lot of thinking when you're writing the definition, so you don't end up, wasting manpower on these non-issues. Second thing, designing appropriate rules and enforcing them, especially in blockchain-based cryptocurrencies that are censorship resistant might be also an issue. And the question is, do we really need to do it for the time being? There are a lot of people saying it's a great innovation. Things will change. So let's see if this really happens, and then we can design appropriate regulatory regime at the moment. So basically, Czech National Bank's message is, it's not regulated. Don't expect us to help you when you get into trouble because you should know what you're dealing with. And we've seen lately some efforts on the European level to actually regulate virtual currencies other than the AML aspects. For example, just last week I learned there is a proposal to have criminal law sanctions on fraud with virtual currencies, or to protect virtual currencies with the criminal law as strongly as you protect payment cards and bank payments. We think that is not a good idea. We should not legitimize this area. And in any case, fraud will be fraud if it's conducted with Bitcoin or bank account money. So basically, we are waiting to be convinced about the benefits of regulation at such an early stage as we are at now. And the third point I'd like to make, there is danger of legitimizing virtual currencies that we still don't understand the Bitcoin system much. I mean, who are the real users? Are there, what's the proportion of legal payments, shadow economy payments, illegal or, money laundering sort of operations going through there? So by regulating virtual currencies too early, you create something that, in my opinion, is a false sense of safety. Maybe if you look at who is speculating these days with bitcoins, a lot of the speculation is taking place in Japan. If you read, and Korea, if you read the newspaper articles from Korean and Japanese newspapers, you see retirees pulling their money from their retirement accounts, buying bitcoins. I don't think that's something that we should support as central banks, because probably some of these people will end up, not getting the full amount back. Now, one of my last points is coexisting with virtual currencies. How we, as a central bank and regulator, live next to this Bitcoin ecosystem. Czech Republic is somewhat of a Bitcoin frontrunner in Central Europe. So. Not in the, we have some merchants accepting Bitcoins, 200, there's not so many, but also gives you the answer on, is Bitcoin really used for legitimate payments? 200 shops is not much. We have 21 Bitcoin ATMs. We have some hardware and software development, so there's a hardware vault where you can save your Bitcoins or keep your Bitcoin keys safely. One of the biggest Bitcoin ATM or virtual currency ATM manufacturers is actually based in Prague. They shipped about 400 units worldwide. They also developed recently a point of sales terminal, and also the idea of a mining pool, which means pooling computer power in order to be more efficient at verifying the Bitcoin transactions and getting the rewards. That idea came from the Czech Republic as well. We have a few virtual currency exchanges, but they're mostly locally targeting the local market, and they're quite small. And we had an interesting legal development. A young man was recently jailed for 9 years because he was convicted of defrauding. Some of you might know Silk Road. After Silk Road, there was Sheep Marketplace, and it only operated like a dark web website where you could buy drugs, guns, whatever other illegal stuff. And it only operated for a couple of weeks, and then the operator disappeared with the money. So police and financial intelligence unit were actually able to trace the guy, and he's in jail now. Now, from a specific or narrower point of central bank, we have quite liberal regime for small payment companies. The regime is meant to encourage innovation, and so that innovation can be tried, or innovation can be tried and tested and seen whether it has a place in the market or not. So we have about 160 small payment providers. A few of them provide virtual currency related services. Meaning you can, they offer a virtual currency exchange or payment gateway in Bitcoins. And there has been some issues with this. Bitcoin being global by design, this small payment license applies or allows you only to provide payments in the Czech Republic. So, that doesn't really go well together. Also, our legal powers in this case, because Bitcoin, as I said, is unregulated. So, if somebody offers Bitcoin services and at the same time, we had the case where, let's say, unnamed neighboring country, couple guys got this small payment license in Czech Republic, went to their home country and had a media interview saying, we got a bank license for Bitcoins in the Czech Republic, and now, you all can bank with us. So this is really making our life quite difficult, because not only we can't do much, but also we have to explain to our colleagues elsewhere that, why is that the case. Also, as I said, what we insist on, though, is that clearly distinguishing what is payment services regulated by us in real money, what is virtual currency business, and sometimes it goes the other way, that people who first just exchange virtual currencies, they also start exchanging, for them, I understand it on a, like a non-legal level. It doesn't matter if you're exchanging PayPal or for web money and Bitcoin, but in case if you exchange PayPal for Czech bank account money, you need to get a license from the Czech National Bank. So that is something we also had to deal with lately. Now, my last slide. Initial coin offerings are on the rise in Czech Republic as well, like were mentioned in Ken's presentation. I will quote UK FCA's definition of an ICO. It's a digital way of raising funds from the public using a virtual currency. We also have a case where one of our supervised entities is now raising money this way, and it brings all kinds of legal questions that you probably not interested in, but the main point I'd like to make, Ken said some of these things might be made illegal in the future. No, that's not the point. The point is some of these things are illegal now, just it takes a little while for people to end up in jail. So, if you're thinking about raising money through an ICO, I highly recommend you talk to a lawyer at least in the country where you're based. As I mentioned, Bitcoins are not securities, but this might not be the case with other digital tokens. And I think what we are going to see very quickly, as we had to deal with nature of Bitcoins and payments regulation, same thing will have to be done with the ICOs and the securities regulation, both on national levels in the EU and probably on a EU level as well. So to conclude, Bitcoin and other decentralized virtual currencies based on it do not seem to be meaningful innovation in payments. More VC regulation at the moment, apart from AML, is not needed. And central banks should continue to monitor virtual currencies as a whole and act if necessary, which seems to be the case with ICOs at the moment. Thank you for your attention.